Good morning. Oh, it's great to see folks. Hi, Ishmael. Nice to see you. Hey, Will. I'm just sending out a couple of invites here. Apologies for the awkward silence.
No, it's all good. They're coming in slowly but surely. Welcome, Jeff.
Awesome. So, on today's Regenerati News Hour, we're going to chat a little bit about Regen Ledger 4.0 and what is coming online with that. I've invited Antonio and Joe from the Bodhicitta Project to come and speak a little bit more about the really fantastic work that they're doing, the relationship between that landscape scale regeneration project and the community staking endowment, and their invitation to the community to have a refi summit down in Bodhicitta. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Hey, Joe. Hey, Antonio. Welcome. We also might get a appearance from our friend Speaker John Nash, who has been working on some AI work. And this will be sort of like a bit of a reveal. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to make it, but he and I have been chatting about this potentially being the moment to reveal some really cool work that's been happening. Um, and yeah, so that's essentially the run of play. I think between those three conversations, we're going to have a vibrant and exciting morning or afternoon, whatever it may be for all of you. So I'm going to start by just kind of talking a little bit through Regen Ledger 4.0. I kind of want to center a bit of the conversation on that. Also be able to bring up any questions about functionality, maybe have some of our validators come and chat. I haven't been actually tracking, but I think we are closing in on chain upgrade time. um, so yeah, that's basically the run of play. I'm going to send out one more swing of invites for some of the folks that I want to be involved in that conversation. David, do you mind? Yeah, I mean, I'd love for you to just maybe share a little bit about like how are you all preparing for the upgrade at Loa? Um, what's yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've got actually Ishmael here. I'm not sure if Ishmael, if you're available, I'm just going to invite you up.
Awesome.
Yeah, Ishmael, you've been invited to speak. If I know you've been prepping, I think we had like less than an hour left until upgrade, and I know this is upgrades from the DevOps perspective are legit. So if you have any thoughts to share, I'd be happy to have you come up and speak, or any of the other validators out there who are in the midst of that. And Ishmael, if you're on your laptop, that probably is not going to work because you're not going to be able to get there. You are Ishmael. Welcome, Ishmael. Talk to us about the life of a validator and an upgrade. What does
Hey,
it mean?
yeah. We've got
Yeah, what does it mean technically? Laptop. That probably is not going to work because you're not going to be able to get there. You've got two speakers going, Ishmael. Awesome.
Talk to us about the life of a validator and an upgrade. What does it mean?
Yeah. We've got
Yeah, what does it mean technically? Laptop. Ishmael, I just muted you. It seems like you've got a little bit of a mic feedback situation. Um, if you don't mind dealing with that, I think you should be able to unmute yourself. I hope you have that power. If not, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Sorry, just saving everybody from the infinite feedback loop, recombinant feedback loop of multiple open mics. I've also invited Corey, our director of product, in to chat a little bit more in depth about Regen Ledger 4.0 and what's moving. Gosh, and there's a bunch of folks out in the audience. Hey, Equimat. Really, there's a couple pending conversations for us to have too. So, Corey, while Ishmael is sorting out his speaker, welcome. Good morning, Regen Ledger 4.0.
Hello.
We're almost there.
Yeah.
This is so exciting.
It's very exciting. Whoop. Oh, I was just hearing some. Oh, it seems like that was again. Is it feedback from Ishmael?
Yeah, I turned off his mic again. You're good to go, Corey.
Cool. Yeah, for me, so I'm just on headphones. Yeah, 4.0. Oh my gosh, it's just so many things moving all the time. I'm actually like I'm pulling up MintScan right now to remind myself of where we are in our block height. This is are we is it we're approaching it, right? If we haven't.
It's close, like T minus an hour or so from the estimate. So yeah, we should look back at the block height, and who knows? It may happen while we're on the Twitter Spaces. That would be a party.
Mm-hmm. So, it's great because I remember the days when it was Etherscan had you could go to a block height in the future and it would show you a little countdown timer, and we were like waiting for the day when like we would have that for Cosmos chains and one of the block explorers would start doing it. MintScan does it now. And they've also got, I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but MintScan also made a little news notice. So there was a banner if you went to MintScan within the past couple of days that was notifying people of the upgrade with the block height. So here it is. I'm pulling it up now. 65. What is it? 6589400. Yeah. Okay. An hour and 40 minutes out. So I don't think we'll be on Twitter Spaces for that long.
Oh, bummer! It won't be a spontaneous Twitter Spaces party. Yeah, but fun anyway. So Corey, do you mind sharing a little bit about and other folks who are in, if you want to raise your hand and dig in and ask questions. But in the meantime, Corey, do you want to just share a little bit? I know we've been socializing the new different features. Feel free to talk about that. But I'm actually curious to just, from the product perspective, what are, not the engineering perspective, right? Not what are the features, but what are the things that Regen Ledger 4.0 is going to be enabling the community to do with Regen Ledger?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So when you say enabling the community to, they're immediately like two different things that I'm thinking about. One is the thing that I think Regen Ledger 4.0 is connected to, which is really about bringing credits to market for the first time and allowing credits to be bought and sold, eco credits. But when we talk about who that's for, the way that we're going to be testing that out is like we've got these mechanisms now in place. We've got a bunch of credits that we've been working with integrating into our system that are really not blockchain native credits, so to speak, but they're credits from legacy registries or for registries that we've partnered with that aren't as blockchain based. And we're trying to use this new tech that we built to bring credits to market to showcase how that can happen with assets that kind of people already understand and expect. And it'll hopefully be a bit easier to do in that because people know what the market price is for a Barrett credit, for example. There is some off-chain expectations around that. But when we talk about what the community can do, other than just buying credits, because I imagine folks on this call, for instance, or maybe people actively in the refi space who aren't just wanting to buy carbon credits, they're wanting to engage more on the producing side. The thing that I don't think we've been as, it hasn't been like top of our of what we've talked about with 4.0, but it's actually one of the really interesting things that is now possible is interacting with our data module. This is the first release where we've had like what we think is like our fully sort of scoped MVP of the data module that allows for data sets to be anchored on chain and allows data sets to be attested to on chain. And it also allows resolvers to be registered with those data sets. So someone can see a data set, can see who sort of put trust signals on that data set, and then they can actually go to a resolver to find the full data payload as well. And I'm happy to talk through the details of like how that works, but I think first it's worth just highlighting like from an end user perspective, like there's a lot to unpack there. And for folks who are wanting to explore with off-chain data and the way that Regen is thinking about graph-based data being something that is indexed on chain, this is now something that's possible, and it's not just possible on mainnet, but it's also possible on Redwood, which is the test net that we maintain that keeps parity with the mainnet version. So just I think Redwood got updated this past Monday, maybe. So that's already live with 4.0. And if folks are wanting to play around, with some faucet testnet tokens and stuff, that's all available already today. And yeah, on mainnet, this will be live in a few hours.
Cool. That's super exciting. Thanks for the overview. And maybe just maybe just briefly talking a little bit about the what's the sort of driving user story for the relationship between the data module and the credit module,
Mm-hmm.
and what are we and I'm actually I see Paul in the audience as well, who's been instrumental in actually working on the data module. So Paul, if you want to chat a little bit about how you all are thinking about that and how you're seeing both as a validator and as sort of an ecosystem member, potentially developing projects, what's the relationship between the data module and the credit module in kind of this origination story about how we're starting to build the trust graph, how eventually we may even start automating credit issuance and have room for programmability and other things. If you want to just speak to that, Corey, a little bit, and Paul, feel free if you'd like to, no pressure, chat a little bit about what you guys have been building. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so the relationship between data, well, it's funny because credits have been, the eco credit module was live in our last version of Regen Ledger. So that's something where we already do have an understanding of what it looks like to have credits on chain. And the way that we were structuring our credit on chain was already kind of hinting at the data module and the way that we're thinking about our data story. So to pick that apart, with every, I guess you could say, like with every on-chain entity that we have within the eco credit module, we have a credit class, we have projects, and we have credit batches. And for each of those, there is some on-chain metadata where there are fields stored explicitly on the network, and there's also some off-chain metadata. And the way that we're storing those off-chain metadata is for each of those, three entities, for credit classes, for projects, and for credit batches, there's a field called the metadata field where you can, it's arbitrary bytes. And so technically, on a programmatic level, you could directly embed JSON in there. You could put in a URL to yourwebsite.com / your project, to give people a sense of where they can find more information about your project. But the way that we've been utilizing that, and the way that we're sort of encouraging folks to do that as well, is to be storing an IRI, a regen IRI in that metadata field, which basically represents a content hash of a data set. And the cool thing there is that we could be on our credit batches, for instance, having an IRI for a set of off-chain metadata, and then we could, in parallel, using the data module, have people be anchoring and attesting to that IRI, independent of its, the fact that it is essentially metadata for a batch, but as an IRI, as a data set, it's something that folks can give trust signals to. So the way to think about the relationship between these, well, I guess first let's talk about just what the on-chain data is for each of these elements. For credit class, I think it's just there's a name and a description, there's a credit type. So for a credit class, you need to be explicit about, is it a carbon credit, is it a water credit, et cetera. And when we get to projects, we're storing directly on chain the project jurisdiction. So what geolocation is the project stored in? We're not at this point in time storing a polygon, with the thought that, maybe for some users, they're not wanting to disclose the exact project boundary of the project that they're working on. But we are storing a jurisdictional region, usually as a country code or a postal code. We're also storing on chain for a project, I believe a name for a project. And then when we get to a credit batch, we're storing the batch start date, the batch end date, and a link to the project that the batch is associated with, as well as the credit class that the project is associated with. So all of those things are sort of embedded into the actual like on-chain data. And then, the question is, well, what other kinds of stuff would you want to have in addition to that? So for projects, I think a good example of what you might want to store as off-chain data referenced via an IRI is a project boundary. So you might have a geopolygon that you're wanting to include there. You might want to have a project plan. You might want to have links to PDFs that kind of outline maybe contracts, maybe land tenure documents. These are all things that you could be designing your own sort of data schema for. And ideally, in our sort of view of how this stuff would go, you would represent that all like in an RDF data set. You would define a schema for it, and so the actual data payload itself would be structured as JSON LD, so JSON linked data. And we have an internal service, but also this is kind of the stuff that Cambium has been working on with Paul and Will, where there's like another public service where you could have a data set and it could be a JSON LD data set, and they'll convert that into a content hash. They will store that as a resolver, and then you can go and anchor that IRI, that content hash on chain, and register the Cambium resolver or register Regen Registry's internal resolver as the place where end users can look up that data payload. And the cool thing about this is, in our approach, rather than saying, oh, everything is on IPFS and everything is identifiable via a content hash, a CID that's just an IPFS identifier, in that case, all of the data would be public. Whereas with the approach that we're taking, where we're using content hashes and explicitly stating where the data is hosted, it allows the hoster of that data the ability to selectively disclose certain pieces of information. So, you could have a service provider like Cambium or like Regen, or, if you have a credit class administrator who's saying, you know what, we're going to host all the data for all the projects that work under our credit class or all the batches that get issued under our credit class. And we're going to make the decision that that you can only get the geopolygons if you're a monitor, or if you're a prospective buyer and you need to send us some buyer documents that show us that you're actually a legitimate prospective buyer, and in which case we'll disclose the geopolygons to you. And so with that, they could have their own verification process for disclosing data. They could register their resolver as hosters of all of these IRIs that projects under their credit class are storing using the data module. And then when an end user makes a request to that resolver to say, hey, I'd like to see the geopolygon, when that is sent back to the end user, it could be sent along with a proof that that geopolygon does sort of correspond with the content hash that was being disclosed. And this is a sort of unique property of the way that we're wanting to design our content hashing system, is that it allows for two things over what's used in IPFS. One is canonicalization of data sets, and the other is Merkleization of these RDF graph-based data sets, so that one could disclose like some data points within the data set without disclosing the entire data set, and still verify that the entire data set was, let's say, attested to or corresponds to that expected content hash in a batch metadata field.
Super exciting. Thanks, Corey. So I'm just going to sort of play that back from a overview. And while I'm chatting, maybe if you mute, that would probably be good. So a little bit of background noise. So I mean, I think what's interesting to me about the data module coming online is that we're going to start to be able to build this very flexible and user-centric data graph about ecological state. And I also think it's interesting to note that the data module was designed from first principles to really center data sovereignty and flexibility alongside this sort of how do we build an open and public graph of ecological state data. but sort of being able to center the choice in a user's ability, and there's I guess there's good legal reasons for this with data privacy laws and regulation. There's also just good practices around people being at choice, around what data they're going to reveal and when, and the data module as a foundation for, as we mature this ecosystem together as a community, really, I think, is built in such a way as to have a very solid foundation for a zero knowledge proofing system, which is one of the things, without saying those sort of hypey words, which get thrown around a lot, is something that you were talking about, the ability for someone to just be checking a hash without actually knowing the details of the data that hash represents. We can start to assemble a verification system that is privacy protecting while also integrity protecting. So it's really exciting. So all of this coming with Regen Ledger 4.0, right? The ability for those of us who are engaged in monitoring, reporting, verification, auditing services to be, Oracle services, to be engaging with the data module of Regen Ledger and building out this trust graph, which is, really foundational to the larger arc of what Regen has always been trying to do, which is create this public infrastructure for originating new ecological assets. The sort of like hypey, exciting, hey, there's a marketplace launching, in referring to that and concentrating on like, hey, there's going to be eco credits live. You can buy them, retire them, basket them, ship them to osmosis for yield earning. And all of that stuff is going to be possible here after we launch Regen Ledger 4.0 and then ship the interfaces and complete the Polygon bridge. That's all. It takes a lot of our focus around what that community of buyers and sort of the community of buyers, the demand side of things gets a lot of attention, but really, the heart and soul of Regen is the supply side, the originators, the project developers, the land stewards, and the scientists. So this data module is really pivotal in our ability as a community to start sense making and start growing our capability to get ever better at linking ecological health information to the creation of value, the minting of eco credits. So thanks for that walkthrough about the data module. I'm super excited about it. The last thing I'd love to have you share with the community before maybe we shift gears in the conversation, Corey, would be if you don't mind just giving everybody on the call a quick walkthrough of timelines. We shared this in the community dev call as well. You did a great internal share of sort of like the updated timelines now that we're getting closer and closer. And now that, this Regen Ledger 4.0 upgrade is happening, it's scheduled. We have the block height, validator communities geared up to go. That takes a huge amount of uncertainty out. So would you mind sharing a little bit of the sort of like the windows for when the different interfaces and sort of features are going to be publicly available, and sort of this rolling timeline that you've shared internally? Do you mind sharing that externally?
Yeah, totally. Maybe before I do, I feel like there was one more thing that I was going to say about the data module story, and that was, not like another, hopefully not another long ramble, but just to point out that being frank with the community, I think, is important. And like, I will just say, our documentation around the data module stuff, it's there for the ledger side of it. And so like, you're going to see, if you're looking into the data module docs, stuff around what it means to anchor it, an IRI, what it means to attest to an IRI, what it means to register a resolver. But the documentation around what it means to create these kinds of data sets and how to convert them into an IRI is it's not where it should be. We've been, unfortunately, and for good reason, focusing our documentation efforts on just other things. And so I just want to make that clear so that if folks are digging around to this and they're having a hard time parsing out the information that they want about how to be creating data sets that can be engaging with Regen Ledger, leveraging RDF and leveraging JSON LD, please jump in the Discord and, just like shout out to us, call out myself, call out, Ryan from our team and some other folks. Also, like Paul and Will from Cambium are very engaged and understand a lot of this stuff with a pretty high proficiency as well. But just to say that for newcomers who are wanting to like understand and maybe play around with this stuff, unfortunately, the docs aren't quite where I think they could be for that type of engagement today. And so, like, yeah, just inviting folks to come into Discord, ask your questions, and we can sort of walk through examples while we're still kind of getting docs up to speed on the data side.
Cool. Yeah, fantastic. And just to, in defense of all the hard work going into the docs are always lagging.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of work to do, and you guys are doing great, I think, providing the heart of that, but miles to go. It's like, it's a never ending process. As more software is shipped, more documentation is needed to help guide people and anchor it into usability. So, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so to timelines, I mean, yeah, at a high level, and we can be pretty quick about this. We're hoping to have by the end of August, user interfaces complete for our on-chain marketplace. And there's still, some details that we're working through with the initial supply that we're trying to put into there. But the intention is that like right around the turn of September, so we can be expecting around like Labor Day. Just after the Labor Day holiday or right before it is when we would be having a user interface with a marketplace, a storefront where you can see specific credits, you can see them for sale, you can purchase them. Now, I will say that there's a big open question to this, and this is really an invitation to the community, is we still need to figure out and decide what is going to be the allowed denom for the marketplace. So, and what that means is what's the currency that people can be buying and selling credits in. That's something that we've decided should be a community-driven conversation. I know that there's been some folks who've been starting to have those talks, but if that conversation doesn't move fast enough, like we could be in a situation where we're ready with our supply and we're ready with our user interfaces, but we don't have a marketplace live because we still haven't reached full alignment and had an on-chain proposal for bringing on a currency to the allowed list. So just, petitioning that to the community. Let's
hint. No.
If you're involved in those conversations, let's keep them moving. And, I'd love to see more activity on Commonwealth to represent like where people's latest thinkings are on that.
There's a great conversation, and we chatted about this in the community dev call.
Cool.
And Ishmael and Dave shared a little bit about their Commonwealth proposal. I still have it on my to-do list to go and comment there. There is a very pretty active conversation about USDC.
Cool.
I'll also just share with the community that I nudged the eMoney team, and they're going to be bringing a Commonwealth discussion forward and a proposal on chain around euro. So that's exciting. So I would expect, and I think the more that people engage, the faster those conversations will mature to on-chain votes. But I would expect at least those two stable coins and the USDC. There's some details there vis-a-vis which bridge the USDC is coming over, or waiting for native USDC. So anyway, there's a lot of ins and outs, and we really want to. I mean, there's this balance of going slow and being thorough in our discussion as a community to sort of ensure safety, and it's a big deal. There's also, if we want the marketplace live, we need to have money in it. So as Corey's saying, that's a blocker, and and it's really blocking on engagement around what our choice is around that. And we could also choose to adopt atoms. For instance, we could choose to adopt Regen. People. There are other options besides stable, although our assumption has always been that by and large people are going to want to transact in a stable coin. So anyway, that's a whole nother world. Maybe we do a deep dive on that in next week's Regenerati News Hour, and we could kind of be starting to think about bringing folks who are engaged in those proposals up. I think that's a good time to be daylighting stuff. Maybe things will already be on chain. I think that's a useful time. So I'm looking at Will and Ishmael out there, and I'll chat with the eMoney team and other folks who are engaged about maybe a thorough public conversation about the different options for everybody.
Cool. And so with that being the rough timeline for the marketplace, you can kind of earmark around end of August, beginning of September, around Labor Day. On For when it comes to NCT being available on osmosis, this is kind of the second prong of how we're bringing credits to market, right? The first is direct listings through something akin to like an OpenSea experience, and the second is an experience that leverages liquidity pools and aggregated basketized assets. That one is dependent on this other set of work that we're doing with the Toucan team, where we're actually going to be creating, and we've been working quite hard for several months now on a bridge from Polygon to Regen Network, so that TCO2 assets can be moved over, and therefore an NCT pool basically can exist on osmosis. So that's the high level of what it is, and the timing of it is roughly a month later. So you can think like end of September, beginning of October is when we're hoping that pool would be live. If folks are wanting to be on the bleeding edge and be transferring assets over, that's something that maybe could be done as early as mid-September. And we'll certainly be making updates with the community as soon as any of that is available, because it will be a permissionless feature. So if you're a holder of NCT credits on Polygon and you're excited about bringing them over to Regen, we could get you in. That's something that would be available as soon as the bridge is up. And then we're imagining that it'll probably be, especially as that's roughly the week of Cosmoverse, it'll maybe be a week or two for us to coordinate all the LP initiation and like liquidity provision to get the pool actually over on the osmosis chain. So yeah, September and October are going to be hot months.
Rock on. Very exciting. Great work, Corey, and to the rest of the team. And thanks for hopping in to share some updates. Yeah, really excited. With that, I want to, sort of shift gears. I want to invite Joe and Antonio up here to share a little bit about what they're working on in Bodhicitta. I mean, Joe, you've been working in Bodhicitta for a couple of years and much longer on the beautiful community that is the Earth Regenerators community. And there's a really active conversation that is happening within that community, and a new kind of emerging cooperation and intersection with Regen Foundation and the creation of a community staking DAO and the emergence of a bioregional validator vision and linking that to eco-credit provision and liquidity pools and kind of a continuous funding model for territorial regeneration. I'm really excited about the linkage between the coordination tools and the community that's being built around Regen Network and the sort of grassroots regeneration community there in Bodhicitta. Antonio and Joe, I don't know if you all can see. I'm trying to invite you to speak. You might be on your desktops. If you are on your desktop, then you won't be able to talk. You'll need to hop onto the phone. Or maybe I'm having a glitch. David, can you see if you can invite either of the two of them? I'm not having any luck. Apologies for the technical delay, everybody.
Sure, hold on. Let me see what I can do.
While we're sorting that out, I'll keep kind of hyping things because I'm pretty excited about it. So, I think that way back in the day, when we first started working on Regen Network back in 2017, very early 2017, the first draft of the Regen Network white paper, which subsequently was thrown out and we evolved for a variety of different reasons. We spoke at length, and one of the pillars of the design was a concept of bioregional validators. That is, compute nodes that are anchored in a specific place, owned by a community of land stewards that is securing a public ledger of ecological health. That's long been the vision of Regen Network. We decided to sort of back away from making that a prerequisite for participation in validation because it's such a heavy lift from a technical perspective to both be a land steward and have land under management and be able to run a validator. Now, I have to say that the community of validators, there's many validators who are maturing towards that. It's super exciting. So we're starting to see the community organically go back to that vision and to those roots. And I think we made the right choice not to sort of force that, because it allows a little bit more of an organic emergence. And we also need validators who may have different, may be approaching things differently. So I'm quite pleased with a little bit more plurality around that. And I'm very excited and about this sort of adoption of a bioregional validator community that is really anchoring, securing, and governing the public ledger of ecological health and the different public utilities we're building, the public digital utilities we're building, to link, reweave the economic value to ecological health. And Bodhicitta and a lot of the work that both Joe and Antonio have been doing for years to envision, Antonio, your work on the permacommons, Joe's weaving of the common lands framework and the ecoversity framework and the storytelling and all the on the ground work with syntropic agroforestry, all of this coming together in this moment, this autumn, as Regen Ledger 4.0 is shipping, as momentum is building in the larger refi space, is just really exciting. So Antonio, I see you're up here. Let me hand the mic over to you to speak a little bit about what's happening, what you're excited about, and we'll keep working to see if we can get Joe up here as well. Good morning and welcome.
Yes, I much prefer listening to Joe than myself talk. But I think what's happening October 3rd through 7th is a emergent phenomenon where we have a lot of people, community members in Barichara who are from there, who are actively engaging in regenerative projects, be it syntropic agroforestry, if it's local marketplaces with value-added products, working with local farmers, to textiles, ceramics, just a lot of arts and crafts. And if you go to the town, and I'm sure, excuse me, I'm in a car right now. If you go to the town, you'll notice that there's a lack of liquidity. There's not a lot of cash flow going around. However, there's a lot of innate entrepreneurial activity, and there's just a fantastic natural setting. And Joe can give the presentation showing the 500,000 hectare bioregion in Barichara that's very well defined by the mountain ranges and the airflow and the weather patterns and the endemic plants. And how do we tie that all together between Cosmoverse and DevCon, inviting people who are refi developers, people who just want to get more involved? So there's a lot going on, and it's an invitation. So of course the Regen Network family is welcome. Right now we're kind of brainstorming what kind of workshops that we can be doing. So we have 5 days in the community throughout the village, different field sites. So there's a lot going on, and we'll be continuing to share that. Joe is on the ground there. I'm back in Sicily right now, where the idea behind this is creating a model in Barichara with the Earth Regenerator so that we can do this throughout the entire Earth and in every region. So I think that this is the type of design pattern where we can be embedding Regen Network into all of these different locations. And it's funny, Gregory likes to use the word orthogonal. So we are orthogonally approaching the bioregional blockchain approach. So I would love to hear Joe say more about this. I can say more about Barichara. I was there for just a week. But it was a really lovely time and a beautiful place. And I think everybody would, just feel really special being there. And of course, not everybody can make it. So we'll try and figure out a way to create some type of digital streaming or some type of interactive workspace online, because this is going to be a lot of valuable workshopping on the ground that everybody can be learning from. So I'll just stop with that. Maybe anybody else wants to chime in.
Yeah. Well, I'll sort of hop in. We're still waiting for Joe. I'm not sure quite what's going on to get him up on stage. Excited for that. And I think zooming out and sharing a little bit of context. So this autumn, there's going to be a bunch of activity that's happening around Colombia specifically, but also larger South American context. I will be in Ecuador immediately preceding all of this at CLIC Quito Nexus Summit in Quito, and then there's Cosmoverse happening in Medellin for all of you cosmonauts out there. We'll see many of you there. It's going to be very exciting. There's a special room getting set aside on September 26th for a refi event. So our friends at IXO, our friends at Wind, Regen Network, and others, many of the validators in the community are doing big things. The Cosmos Hub is contemplating a big commitment to ecological regeneration as part of its charter. There's just a lot moving in the Cosmos ecosystem. It's going to be sort of bubbling. And then immediately after that, there's going to be an event hosted by the Blockchain Infrastructure Carbon Accounting Working Group, BICOWG, with a bunch of the leaders in the voluntary carbon market, a bunch of leaders in the emerging refi space. So Toucan and Klima, Regen Network, we're all going to be getting together after Cosmoverse and trying to do a deep dive on data standards, on how we're cooperating on infrastructure. It's going to be very exciting. If folks who are listening in feel compelled, it's invite only, but if you feel like you need to be there, please reach out to me and we can have a conversation about that. So there's going to be this sort of like deep infrastructure market confab happening right after Cosmoverse. And then the next day, Barichara, the refi summit in Barichara emerges. And then right after that ends, you have DevCon. And so there's just this density of engagement and conversation. And I'm really excited because I feel like one of the bigger problems in the refi space is that it can be a little bit cerebral and oftentimes maybe a little tech forward. And certainly, I think all of us in the Regen Network community are believers that technology is an enabler for the type of regenerative culture that we want to be creating. But I just think it's going to be super great to have some grounded experiences in the community, to be going out and planting and digging, working on water restoration, hearing from different people on the ground, and kind of like re-centering the conversation. Because the biggest, I think, risk in all of this is that our enthusiasms get away from us and we don't manage to ground regenerative processes in place, and that includes governance or science or ecological action. And so kind of like capping this experience and having a real rooted place in the mix of that, the rolling crypto circus, which happens around DevCon and the different ETH community events, is going to be, I think, really valuable for us as a movement. So Antonio, thanks so much for kind of leading the charge there to make that invitation. And Joe, it's just really exciting.
Yeah, I got an update from Joe. Unfortunately, he can't access his mobile Twitter app. But I did want to just kind of touch base on the Regen Foundation 500,000 Regen delegation to the Earth Regenerators is an opportunity for us to be designing some new mechanisms and some new design patterns regarding both governance and how we structure validating staking rewards and how those are reinvested in community regeneration projects. So that's one of the things that is top priority for us during this event and is ongoing, is structuring a DAO. So basically, the 500,000 Regen, we set up a Earth Regenerator validator, and it could be in Barichara, it could be somewhere else, but either all or a significant portion is delegated to the ER validator. And then a ER DAO is then voting and managing how the staking rewards are given out to different regenerative projects. So that's one of the top priorities. And then, behind that is the establishment of an ecoversity or a bioregional learning center. And we're right now putting together the funds to acquire this kind of anchoring land that is going to tie together the different watersheds in the region so that we're actually bringing rivers back to life that have been destroyed through both through extractive agriculture as well as civil violence. And it's just crazy to see how the human element is an exact mirror of the environmental degradation. So as we're restoring these landscapes, we're healing ourselves and our relationships in the process. So it's a really beautiful thing. And one of the most special things about this project happening. So there's a lot going on. Joe is prolific in storytelling, and right after this call, I believe at the top of the hour there is a Barichara updates. So if anybody wants to learn more, welcome to tune in, and those videos get shared online as well. So thank you, Gregory, and thank you everybody for tuning in to this week.
Yeah, totally. Antonio, thanks for stepping in, and Joe, sorry you had technical difficulties. Yeah, so I'm excited. High level, I'm super excited. I'm going to do everything I can to be present. I think it's basically a certainty, although I have some family family negotiations to go through because I've got two beautiful kids and a beautiful wife, and I'm going to miss them if I if I'm gone for that long. But that aside, yeah, just sort of rooting. Let's just I'm just holding space for this as a real opportunity to be rooting the technosphere back into the biosphere through a cultural experience in Bodhicitta, and super exciting. So rock on. And I'll just put a couple pins in important conversations related to that relationship between technology, culture, and ecology. I think top of mind is going to be how we're leveraging the groups module. So a lot of this starts to get my mind automatically churning on features for Regen Ledger 5.0, actually. Starting to think about what it is, even as we're approaching this big upgrade to 4.0, and even as we're going to be working to sort of like fully engage and service the massive functionality that's going to be unlocking. Already I think my mind and many of our minds are starting to think about what is the functionality, what's the next stage of functionality that we can already see as latent in these use cases in which we're engaging. We're hearing from a community that says, here are the things that we want to do. We want to be able to funnel money to different projects within a territory that's coming from staking rewards. This needs to be sort of like a joyful and easy experience. What are the things that Regen Ledger, what are the features that Regen Ledger needs to be able to provide as sort of as public goods for projects like Bodhicitta to be able to quickly and easily replicate around the world. So this is just this big question that I'm holding. I don't want to put you on the spot, Ryan. I see you in the audience. I'm going to just send an invite. I know you might be listening in the background and doing other work in the lead up to the upgrade. But if you're willing to, Ryan, I'd love it if you'd be able to hop up and just in kind of like I don't know if the right word here is parsimonious, but in a sort of in a concrete way. And Corey, you're welcome to chime in on this as well. Just talk about what the ideas are for a simple, clean, much smaller scoped Regen Ledger 5.0 upgrade that is hitting some, I think the groups module now is available in the SDK, upgrading to that latest version of the SDK, project IDs. There's a couple just like really clean, small upgrades that are I believe we're sort of already socializing, we're chatting about. I wonder, as you've been doing, and thanks so much for managing the release project of Regen Ledger. It's a massive job, and you and Corey are doing great. And I think you've been in the trenches. But would you be willing to just share a little bit about kind of the thoughts? This isn't a commitment exercise, but the thoughts that have been emerging about the next upgrade of 5.0 and kind of how it's relating to these kind of on the ground use cases.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for inviting me up, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm Yeah, as far as 5.0 goes, we're trying to get in a process of smaller release cycles, so we're not bundling too many new features in that results in a long testing and auditing process and having to cover a lot of ground. So for 5.0 at the moment, we're currently trying to keep the scope really small and focused on updating to the latest version of Cosmos SDK, which will give us access to the group module, which is a huge feature set that will enhance using eco credit classes and managing them in a DAO-like way. Every level of the chain, like you could use a group account for a resolver. So a data resolver could be managed by multiple addresses using a group account and having their own decision policy around adding data to a resolver. Same with credit classes. The admin of a credit class could be managed by a group account. All the way down to like an issuer could be a group account, even a project admin could be a group account. So the real focus right now for 5.0 is getting updated to the latest version of Cosmos SDK, which will add the group account and enable this DAO-like functionality with the features that we already have. And then in addition to that, we're updating to the latest version of IBC Go and looking into the use cases for interchain accounts. And also relayer incentivizations around the latest IBC version. And additional features in the SDK include updated governance proposals using the updated Gov module and the potential of adding transaction tips. So we're looking into use cases for that as well. So the scope of 5.0
Can I
is,
pause you for just a
yeah,
sec? Can I pause you for just a second? So I want to talk about the sort of upgrade, IBC Go upgrade, and interchain accounts. Just some concrete use cases that I'm really excited about, and we'll see how this all emerges. You know, it's all quite new, but there's a lot of demand. I was just chatting with Ethan Fry of Cosmwasm and Confio, and he has a new project called Wind, which is sort of a refi, a sister Cosmos regenerative finance project. And he was just sharing with me that they're sort of shifting their focus to having, you know, essentially building a DeFi mechanism, sort of that in which swap fees from some of the Juno swap and some other things can get funneled to support projects on the ground, right? And so, and I was sharing, oh, we're just starting to work on, you know, a project registry, and he's like, oh, great, we don't have a project registry. The Cosmos Hub wants to create an automated offsetting service for the bigger community, right? So that people could subscribe, and you know they can manage the relaying, and we could start to see, you know, sort of like streaming payments to projects that are producing regenerative outcomes that are quantified in eco credit. So that's some of those, just to sort of like center it out of the tech and into the experience that people are going for, and why I'm kind of excited about that. So I'll pass it back over to you, Ryan.
cool. Yeah, no, that's great. That's exactly what, yeah, we're trying to look into right now is leveraging these features that are available in our dependencies, such as Cosmos SDK and IBC, and finding out what use cases we have for them on Regen Ledger, and using our existing feature set in combination with these new features available in our dependencies. And then while that's going on, and while we're working on 5.0, we'll be speccing out new Regen Ledger specific features. And we have several in the backlog that obviously we want to get working on. Some of the higher priority ones that we want to start working on, speccing out for most likely the following version after 5.0. And depending on if they're breaking changes or not, it might be a minor release, which is still state machine breaking and would require an upgrade. But yeah, in general, looking ahead, we're looking into the independent projects is a big one, and that would basically allow for people to create projects on their own without having to have a credit class issuer create a project. Right now, projects are only allowed to be created by issuers within a credit class, but essentially we want to create a pipeline where a project could create an entity on chain and then apply to a credit class, maybe apply to multiple credit classes. And that way they can basically act as an independent entity prior to being accepted into a credit class and receive initial funding, start building up their reputation, and having this in combination with the group module, like having this essentially this DAO like structure for a project, and then decisions about applying to different credit classes and being approved to different credit classes would also be managed by these decision policies with the group module, if that's the preferred choice. So independent projects is a big feature that we're looking into. In line with that, eco credit
So that would be a 6.0. You're seeing that as a 6.0. You're seeing sort of like the critical path here is sort of integrate with the larger with the Cosmos SDK, and integrate those dependencies, sort through all of that, get it up and running on 5.0, and then roll into 6.0 and focus on projects and maybe a couple of these other smaller feature upgrades.
Yeah, exactly. And it's most likely going to be breaking changes, so it will probably be another major release following 5.0. So I think 6.0 is pretty accurate in terms of thinking. Ideally, like this 5.0 upgrade focused on updating our dependencies and getting up to speed with the latest features is not something that's going to be like 6 months down the road. I think there's a likely possibility that we can get something up and running in a couple months. But yeah,
Awesome.
And then working on specking out these other features, independent projects being a big one. And then the other one is eco credit pre-financing. We're looking into forward contracts, ex-ante credits. There's work that was being done by Earthbank on a bond module that would support forward contract-like functionality. And all this kind of ties into the independent projects in the sense where how do these projects get pre-financing prior to being accepted to a credit class. So there's a lot of product decisions to be made and speccing out to be done, especially in relation to how our current module structure is and whether projects need to actually be pulled out as a separate module or whether they can still remain and exist within the eco credit module. And that all depends on a lot of the work around eco credit pre-financing options and where that lands. So a lot of product work to be done. We'll be doing that product work and would love to engage with the community and get more ideas and feedback around what they would like to see. But yeah, 5.0 will be mostly focused on dependencies and thinking about use cases with these new features, and then we'll be speccing out new features that are Regen Ledger specific while we're working on that. And
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sort of step in, and Ryan, thank you so much.
Yep.
Super helpful. I think it's been a really vibrant conversation. You know, we sort of ran the gamut of the news about the 4.0 upgrade, some descriptions of the features, the data module, how exciting that is as a foundation for sort of like what we're really aiming to build as this public good of an open origination system around ecological value. And and by the way, there's a marketplace for eco credits coming online. That's pretty epic. Really grateful for Antonio and Joe for sharing a little bit about Barrechada. So we got to zoom into a particular place that's working on integrating a lot of these features and tools to build territorial scale regeneration. And then Ryan, thanks so much for giving us the overview about what comes next. You know, what 5.0, 6.0, tighter release cycles, some really exciting features coming online. So thank you. Thanks everybody for listening in. As always, we'll be here next week, Regenerati News Hour. I think we'll probably focus a little bit about on the allow list conversation related to currencies being used in the marketplace of Regen. So look forward to that. We'll probably have some other tangential conversations as well. There's always so much going on. And with that, I'll bid you all adieu. Have a beautiful day, and see you all on the interwebs in the meantime.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone.